Hey, hello, and welcome to On the Road to DevHops. As you know, this is where Brian Finster and I, Trace Bannon, belly up to the bar and start sparring with each other about things that are driving us crazy throughout the day with the technology that we deal with. Brian, you want to say hello tonight?
Hi.
And occasionally we invite somebody along with us because we need a better punching bag. And Vilas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Vilas and I run developer experience over at build.com. I've spent some time working with Brian at Walmart. So lots of good stories and bad stories to share.
So you work with Brian at Walmart. So how long has it taken you to get over that experience? Therapy, anything?
Still going through it.
All right.
No, see, I reported to him and I put him through all sorts of hell.
Oh.
He had several escalations about me.
So the real question is Brian, are you past the experience? Did you go through the therapy? I guess would be the better question.
No, I missed Willis.
Yeah, we still get a regular dose of each other.
Yeah.
Well, I am glad to meet you, Vilas. I think we've been on a couple email threads or a couple of other text chains before, so it's really great to meet you tonight. Part of this is that we're bellying up to the bar, and so we always talk about what we're drinking tonight. And in the spirit of transparency, for kind of being agile, I will say that I'm on a health kick, and I'm trying to improve. 2022 is about writing the things that happened in 2021. So tonight, I'm actually going for some bougie water. This is my Fuji water, which is from Walmart. But I am going to put it into a white wine glass, so it makes me feel like a grown-up. Brian, what are you drinking tonight?
I started early because I needed to relax and I had some Angel's Envy. So.
Now wait a minute. We both talked about not drinking tonight.
Yeah. Well, I have reasons. It's fine.
Vilas, what are you drinking tonight?
I am going to drink after this because I'm guessing I may need to unwind after a hard discussion here. So
yeah, after a couple of punching bag moments. So,
yep.
The reason what we want to talk about tonight is something that's just been driving us, but at least Brian and I both crazy, and that is autonomy. Great word, right? Got to have autonomy. Teams got to have autonomy. Peeps got to have autonomy. Brian, talk to me a little bit about autonomy, about what's going on there.
I think it's wildly misunderstood. I've seen two massive anti-patterns with autonomy, right? One is where management says you're autonomous, which means I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do, but you have accountability, and
Okay.
you have the ability to fail. And the other one is, well, we're an autonomous team, which means we get to do whatever we want to do. We can use any language, we can use any framework, we can use any platform, and I mean, we kind of have an idea about the sort of things we want to build, but we just kind of want to build the things we want to build and get paid for it.
I'm running into that second one, and it's driving me just bat bleep crazy. It is, the idea is not that we want to clip everybody's wings and keep them from being successful and keep them from experimentation, but within reason, right? Ultimately, we're trying to get business, right? We're trying to bring business value or accomplish a mission value.
No one tells you what autonomy is. Like, no one defines that. Like, the worst thing is when someone says, oh, you have the autonomy to decide, but never defines what that means, really, like how much. And that's really where this thing becomes problematic, right? What does autonomy really mean? Can I just go ahead and rewrite the whole of our code? Probably not, right? Where does that limit stop?
Well, if we go to the definition, as I just did a really quick Google with the magic of the internet, it's the right or condition of self-government. Okay, so I can govern myself. I can make decisions for myself.
So is that really true, though? Is that really true? Like in the work environment, can someone actually make a decision for themselves, like without anything?
Well, they're not a man without
Yeah,
a country, right? They're living, if you're living in a country, or if you're not living in a country, you say, I have the autonomy to govern myself, self-govern. Okay,
well,
that's one thing, but pursuant to what wrapper? What's
so
the scope of that?
this is the point, right? That's Villas was talking about is, what are the guardrails within which
Yeah.
I get to make a decision, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
It's like I have autonomy within this rule set, and outside this rule set, there's in my if I become too autonomous, it's going to impact other people
That's right.
in negative ways, and I need to make sure that I limit my blast radius.
Yep.
It's just like when you used to scope variables. Well, I guess you still scope variables, but they're right. You had a variable that was within a method or
Yeah, I
a
always
routine.
use global scope
Of
because
course, the
Yeah,
best.
well, of course you did,
the best
Brian.
is
That's why
global scope,
everything,
yeah.
it's all working still, right? But you know what I'm saying? It's the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
think about it in terms of living in a community, I have the autonomy within my house, and I'm the boss in my house. I'm saying that my husband doesn't hear me. So I am the boss in my house. But then we live in a small town. And so there are rules of that small town. And then our town is within a county, county within a state, state within the United States. So there are levels of autonomy. There are flavors of autonomy. And unfortunately, just driving the point home that you made, if I'm on a development team, it's
Yep.
maybe more akin to being in a house or maybe more akin to being in a town. But if I parade around that I'm the federal government, I'm going to have like a Waco situation going on, right? If anybody remembers that, they're probably dating myself right there.
Well, and and Villas and I both worked in platform at the same organization, and we saw the same sort of madness. Where you've got a platform that supports a broad swath of technologies, right? Everything you could possibly need, and yet not apparently want. Well, we want to use Haskell because we think it's cool. Well, the platform doesn't support Haskell. Well, it should because we want to use Haskell. So we're going to build something in Haskell and force you to support it. We'll just complain to our management that your platform doesn't support Haskell.
Brian, it's that thing, but like when you think of autonomy, for I feel a lot of teams think of innovation needs autonomy kind of thing, right? I always think about this, right? If you look at a toolkit and you have all the tools you need to get the job done and you can innovate, you already have solved that problem. Now, if you want to rewrite the rules of the underlying platform, that's a lot of work. And do you really want to do that work? And 90% of the time, teams don't want to do that work. If you really ask them, right? What they want is everything is done for us. We're just going to write the business logic. We're going to innovate at that top layer, right? And then get stuff done. So I think it's just a question of, have we asked folks, do you really want to do this? When you ask them, they usually are like, yeah, probably not, right? So I think most of the times we used to get that back when you used to ask those questions.
So let me poke at that a little bit. I think it depends on the situation and depends on what the products are that are being rolled out. Because I can tell you that we've got for one particular software factory that I'm working with, literally two teams that are sitting really close proximity, like they could turn around and lob Nerf balls at one another. Yet one is using Angular and one is using React, but underneath it's the same digital platform. It's the same paths underneath it. So I raised the question, why are these different? And it was we want that. Now, they were far enough along that do you force one to rewrite? Because now we have a proliferation. I've got additional maintenance costs. I have additional, and I'm going to have to do more in the long run. And there's not that reusability. Like there are things that one team is creating that could have been better shared if they hadn't done that. So how do you line? That's at the most fundamental level inside the team, most fundamental level. How do you help folks to say, well, you can innovate and at the same time, be cognizant of the impact on.
Yeah, I think there is a gap there. I think there is a gap, right? So we usually look at the process and we say, okay, something is missing here, right? There's something that's missing there is the clear direction at a level above them. Right. So usually you want clarity in terms of your technical strategy, technical direction, a choice of a language or a choice of a coding platform or even a cloud platform that can be pretty significant because a lot of money, a lot of effort goes into managing everything there, right? Writing utilities specifically for that, all of that. So yeah, something's missing at that level where someone hasn't clarified, hey, this is a direction, we have made this choice, can we commit to it? Unless you give me data or you give me a reason why we shouldn't be doing it, in which case we have to evaluate it and do it. It's the same. I hate to use the word agile like randomly, but it's sort of just fast, improving fast, like failing fast, whatever it is you want to do.
Well, and I was having a conversation related to this earlier today. That at the end of the day, if your organization doesn't have like that North Star, that mission that you're on, and you don't
Yes.
have that every team aligned to that mission, every team understanding they're part of the mission, and every team seeing themselves as part of a larger team contributing to that mission, then the teams are out for themselves instead of out for the mission, and they won't even seek to collaborate.
Yeah.
Let me add on top of that. And then Vilas, I don't mean to step on you. So I think you're right that the teams need to be aligned to the mission, but I also don't think the teams always have the skill from an experience perspective, right? So if a lot of our dev teams can be newer in career, they don't have a mid-level engineer, they don't have someone who's experienced to help them understand architectural trade-offs. And so their natural reaction is, that's pretty cool. And it isn't, I don't need any other, the library impact is pretty small because they've been taught about dependencies because they've heard about SBOM lately and they're smart there. But I think part of it is a lack of experience. I really do think that a piece of it, but only one piece of it.
Lack of experience. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that, something that I would just pound into people's heads when they would go and do just resume-driven development, right? It's like, so there was a team I know.
And by the way, when Brian says pound into head, he means educate them gently.
Yes.
Yes, educate them with love and psychological safety.
Yeah, with love. Yeah. No, I'm very direct. And there was a team I ran into once where it seemed like they were collecting languages for fun. Right. So in their product, they, their one set of things that they owned. They had C#, they had React, they had Python, they had Scala, they had there was another one. Right. They were just collecting languages. Right. And I remember walking up to a totally different team one time, and they were like playing around with technology. And I said, look, we're here for a reason. Fall in love with the business problem, not the technical problem, right? You want the technology to serve the business, not your inner joy, right? You should find inner joy in solving the problem, not in making things super complex because complexity is fun.
But Brian, I want to go back to what Tracy said. By the way, what Tracy, you mentioned as experience, I read it as education, right? Which means, does the developer have the education or the training to know this is what they should do instead and not do what they do, right? But Brian, to your point, here is where I have seen this, right, in the past, not just at Walmart maybe, but even before that, right? Sometimes it's just like, hey, I've been waiting on this for a month. And for me, this is the number one thing I'm doing. I don't care what your priorities are. You could deliver this in 5 months and I don't care, but I didn't need this now. And so guess what? I'm going to write whatever I like, right? And that's going to unblock me because I am incentivized to deliver. It doesn't matter what choice of.
Oh no, I totally
There's a good
agree.
point there.
I mean, if the environment doesn't support you and you're being blocked, you're just going to go and clear the blockage. Right?
Exactly.
But there are two different kinds of education there. Two different kinds of education. Where Vilas is going is that sometimes you come into an organization, and I was this is going to date me. I was a VB.NET developer and I needed to learn C#, right? Back in the day when somebody actually wrote VB.NET. We're going to get haters when I say that, by the way. But if somebody needed to be upskilled, right, then you upskill them. And yes, if you didn't, you would have that situation where they would muscle memory takes them back to, what do I know? How do I get it done fast? Because there's a pressure that's there. So that piece is an educational piece. When I'm talking about some of the experiential things, it's having been mentored, walk through maybe understanding of what the trade-offs are above and beyond. I need to learn this new language. I need to learn this technology because it's been mandated, right? Or it's the guardrails within my organization. Folks don't always think about the other impacts. They don't always think about the maintenance, right? Or the ongoing lifespan of that software.
This is where you need to be really explicit. You know, one of the I saw a presentation years ago about a DevOps Enterprise Summit actually, and they were talking about how they communicate to teams about how they should be doing things like this, right?
Mhm.
And it was anchors and buoys. And you had anchors. These are non-negotiable. These
Mhm.
are you
Yep.
can't choose, right? And that's stuff like compliance and security and that sort of stuff, right? These are anchors, and you can't change these. And then you have buoys that as long as you stay within the buoys, you're safe, right? You're in the swimming pool, right? And you're everything you want to do is well supported within the buoys,
Mhm.
right? Um, but if you want to experiment and swim outside the buoys, there's a few things. Number one, you're on your own,
Mhm.
right? Number two, you really need to make sure you understand how to limit your experiment so that when it fails, which most experiments are destined to fail, that you limit your blast radius. So don't do anything mission critical with that experiment, right?
Mhm.
And if it succeeds, let us know and let's talk about it, and we'll see if it makes sense to bring it inside the buoys.
Let me ask you something, Brian. Is there a disincentivizing for going outside the buoy?
It depends on the organization. I know you asked
Because
Brian, but I'll jump in there. It
Well,
depends on the
so
yeah,
organization.
but here's the thing, right?
the back
Yeah,
pressure to going outside the buoys, right, is ownership of outcome, right? And this is something that a lot of organizations struggle with is they don't say so autonomy doesn't mean I get to do what I want. It means I have ownership of
yes.
Mhm.
everything and the results of my decisions.
Brian, let me make this easy. There is no organization that is able to nail on that outcome because they fear disincentivizing their engineers. And
Mhm.
engineers, by default, now when like tech is hiring folks, they're hiring bar raisers and things like that, right? How are you going to keep a bar raiser interested? You let them challenge themselves and drive new things. And that results in people swimming past the buoy, saying, hey, you know what? I discovered new lands here, right? This is mine now, right? And that essentially is the thing that challenges platform,
Mhm.
and then platform appears as this huge ivory tower thing, right? Like, oh, don't do this, and these people are like, no, we are the people and we need to get this done, kind of thing. So that's where the challenge is. There has to be an incentive method, like you said, which doesn't exist.
I think I heard a phrase lately, kind of liked it, kind of hated it, because it carried with it something that kind of made me feel good as a dev. It said, look, treat your developers like pilots, right? So don't have a lot of them. Got to make sure they get enough sleep, right? You got to make sure that they're educated. Got to make sure that they're trained. But they're the pilots, right? And so they get the special hat. They get to go to the front of the line.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, to your point, there can be an arrogance. I call my
Mm-hmm.
brother Joe Architect Flyboy because he's a pilot in his spare time, and there's a certain I can do these things. I can, I have something that one ups, or I have a star, right? Star-bellied Sneetches. I got a star on my belly because I'm just so great and
But
so amazing.
pilots don't have total autonomy. Even
They
fighter
don't.
pilots,
Yeah.
even fighter pilots don't have total autonomy.
But some of them will still buzz the tower, and that's where the problem comes, right? No, I'm just
They'll
joking.
buzz the tower once, and then they'll not be a pilot
That's
anymore.
true. That's true.
That's
So
the big
I
one.
think I believe we have been misled by some of the movies that we have been
Yes.
watching. but
There
but but
are
Probably.
guardrails,
No,
right?
but here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Okay, so I have to first contradict myself a little bit, which is sometimes the folks who do discover new lands beyond the buoy are actually worth their weight in gold. Like
Mhm.
these are the people you want, right? But you also want them to do it within reason. So that's where the outcome-based incentive comes in, right?
Mhm.
And so that's what I feel there is no way to uniformize that across an organization, because there is always going to be, we are always looking for these superstars or unfortunately named rock stars,
Yes.
and that creates the whole autonomy discussion. Oh yeah, give them the autonomy, let them do whatever they want.
But I think you take part of it outside the product delivery team. I think you take part of the innovation out of that. And what I mean is provide a program,
Okay.
provide the opportunity for them to innovate, give them some extra time to do it, give them a financial award, right? You have this amount of time. We do something within my corporation this way. Granted, we do a lot of additional research then, and we want people to be doing things that they fail and get thrown away because we're learning from it. If you provide them with that outside that product team, right, outside the delivery cycle that they need to move forward with, perhaps you can start to incentivize and give them that freedom, but it's not impacting what's going to, it's not impacting, it's not mission critical. We're not holding things back. Maybe there's a way that we could help. There's a financial aspect to this, but might that be less expensive? Here could be an interesting research topic. Might that be less expensive than the maintenance cost of doing something completely different?
Villas and I both experienced one time a situation where somebody wanted to do something that was outside the buoys, right? That it was.
I'm shocked you said once.
Yeah, but there's one particular one I'm thinking of.
Okay.
Right, because it was mission critical. They're going to drive it outside the buoys to do, work in a way that was.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Okay.
Was not supported by our platform. We didn't know how bad the outcomes would be because no one had ever done that, but we did know the platform didn't support it, and we advised them strongly not to try. Their attitude was that, well, a platform should support it because Google does it that way, right? And then they went forward and did it on this mission critical thing. And then when it all just slammed into a brick wall, suddenly it was our fault.
But Brian, this is the bigger question, right? Here, what we just talked about, which is the North Star. The North Star was moved without necessarily a thought given to like the entirety of work life and everything else, right? Yeah. So I would say that's a bug, right? That's a bug in the process where someone should not have moved so essentially it was saying we need to work like another company, we need to work better. So guess what? We're just making wholesale changes by allowing a group of folks to do whatever they want.
So did they attempt to change their process as well? So, because I'm an outsider of this story and I can see you guys like looking at each other like, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember that too. Remember when we had to stay up all night? Remember when we flamed that person?
Yeah, we remember that for sure.
It sounds like it. So
this was the, I think, the most painful thing I've seen happen to platform.
But when you have, so I want to dive into it just a little bit more.
Go for it.
So what was driving their desire to change? Was it resume-based development? Was it that their North Star was being moved on what they had to deliver? It was mission critical. Did they have a short time frame? Like, was there some imperative? Was there something that drove them, understanding that they ignored the advice to, the guidance from y'all to not do it? But was it really just, we're pilots, we're cool folk, we're going to do what we want to do, we've got autonomy?
There was a couple ways to solve the problem they were trying to solve, and they picked the one that Google does.
I think one thing to be clear, right? I think they came from a thought process of, hey, we want to do this well. Okay. So full marks to the initial intent of it.
Okay.
And like Brian said, there was a debate on like, hey, this versus this and all that. I think the choices made or the motivation for those eventually that moved them towards those choices were highly suspect, like Brian said.
Somebody's got a spouse at Google? No, I'm just joking. So no. That's interesting. That's a pretty interesting that they went. When you get into those situations where you're discussing and you're having the open dialogue, and somebody still goes against the bigger, that's like an indicator. Gotta tell you, that's like a day one indicator.
This was like next level, right? Because you do something out of ignorance, right? Then you do something that someone tells you probably won't work, but you're going to try it anyway. And then you do something that someone tells you won't work, and you say, well, it should work that way, so we're going to do it and drive you to make it work that way. Okay. So that's like next level arrogance.
So by the way, this is definitely a area that had autonomy, right? Like, and in this case, the blast radius was pretty large
Yeah, it's huge.
because yes, so it touched a lot of parts. And then the whole challenge here, and this is something we should discuss maybe as a sort of a learning, right? How would you not do that? For example, like in this case, we discovered a bug. We know that the bug exists now, exists at a point where the North Star not just specifies the what, it specifies the how. It says, this is how we're going to do it, which is not what those should do. So what are your thoughts? I'm actually interested to hear what, Tracy, you have to say, because me and Brian are too close to it.
Without the exact context of exactly the situation, right? I don't have the same scars that you have on this one. There normally is, I call it the throat to choke. There's normally some more senior folks within the organization that have final authority. Now, generally, it's kind of like being a parent. When my kids went to school every day, I had veto authority over the clothes, but I rarely, if ever, pulled it out. There's like one or two instances I can remember that, but it was pretty important that shirt went to a place where that shirt shouldn't go to. So no, march yourself back upstairs and you change that shirt. The organization every organization needs to have somebody who's in that role. And that person should be inserted into the team, but not a part of the team full time, right? They should be able to come in, have the conversations, understand what's going on. And normally it's a head nod. There's no big review boards that come every quarter, right? We got to do away with some of that, just drudgery and control. But somebody should have said no, who had the authority to say no.
I really like the idea that you said where someone is inserted into this, coming in to sort of settle things or something like someone like a moderator, whatever you want to call it, right? But I actually like that idea, and I don't know, hindsight, maybe that would have been something that we could have used.
Well,
yeah.
So I call that, I'm going to use an old school word. I call that an architect. Yep, I call it an architect. And so, and Brian hears me. Ready? Put on your oxygen mask. I'm getting onto the soapbox. Agile seemed to kill architecture because all of a sudden we're just going to emerge. We're going to figure out what we're doing on the fly. It's going to emerge out of it. Well, that's bunk unless you're writing something exceptionally tiny, truly, that it really doesn't matter, has no impacts on the things around it. When that happened, we pushed that off. And now we're at the point where we have so many discrete moving parts. We do need to have architects, but there's this concept that the architect should be able to speak a lot of languages. And I don't mean coding languages. I mean, they need to speak at a lot of different levels. So I like to say, and I stole this from a book that uses a different thing for it, but an elevator, you need to be able to go from the boardroom to the boiler room. So I need to be able to walk up and work with that team, understand what that team's doing, not getting their Wheaties all the time, but I need to be a part of that. But then I need to be able to go upstairs and talk about what's going on. And if there's a challenge that I need to change, depending on how tall that high rise is, right? I may need to be some other levels in between, but in general, you should have somebody who's floating in and out, providing that guidance, letting the team have its appropriate amount of autonomy, but then being the gatekeeper. You gotta have that gatekeeper.
The struggle there, and the reason why people like me don't trust enterprise architects is because a lot of them can't get down to the basement, and they have a God complex.
So agree with all those things. I did a stint as an enterprise architect, and I can tell you it was really hard to not be like, you will do exactly what I say in the way that I say it, and I will not code anymore. I shall just draw boxes and lines and some arrows.
Before I forget, you and I should, on another episode of this, have a conversation about emergent architecture in a large-scale system. No. Because I have a positive example of emergent architecture in a large-scale system, but it's probably not what people imagine.
Okay, I wrote it down. It is on the Rocketbook card, so I have to. I don't get any royalties for this. But you know, I can erase my index card, so I can just like
Yeah,
erase
so
what
we-
Brian said, but it looks like I wrote it for
We need
permanent.
to talk about that because people don't understand what emergent architecture means either. But you know, I think you know, if I were to like box this up, right, is that I have a responsibility
Mhm.
on a development team to understand what it is that my job is, right? Because you know the organization has goals. My team's goal is to support the organization's goals. We have
Mhm.
capabilities that we're supposed to be delivering to the organization. My team's job is to deliver those capabilities the best way we can.
Yep.
We also have a responsibility to do it responsibly, right? Pilots don't say, you know what, I wonder what happens when I fly the 747 outside of its envelope when it's full of passengers. Let's experiment, shall we? They don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They behave responsibly. They understand that there could be negative consequences to flying outside the boundaries, and they can't necessarily predict what those consequences are. I have done experiments on stuff that goes to production before, but it's always been like, oh, we're going to try writing this a brand new service that doesn't do much, right? It basically collects logs. You know, it's just
Something
small,
benign. Something
something
benign.
benign that we could
Mhm.
easily replace. We're going to try doing this new thing with that, because if it fails, it will take us no time at all to rip it out and replace it with something that's used as a standard technology.
All right, so I'm gonna walk it back, and then I want Vila. I want to hear what you have to say about this, Vila.
Sure.
As you guys are talking about this, it really strikes me that what's missing in all of this is leadership. I don't mean dictatorial. I mean leadership. If you don't know your role in the organization, well, that's from leadership. If you don't know what the mission is in a way that's consumable and understandable, I don't mean some lofty strategy document that nobody wants to look at because it's 300 pages long. If you don't have somebody who is getting on the phone or walking the floor or whatever it is and understand and helping you to understand in your blast zone, right? The town hall meeting, I need to have the town hall over at the local borough hall. It's 3 blocks away. I need to be able to go over there and understand what are the rules? What are my zoning laws? Why is it changing? How is it going to impact me? We need to have that kind of accessibility. So I'm hearing, got this interesting juxtaposition. I got folks that want autonomy. They've been told they're going to get autonomy. They're all grown up now. I get my autonomy. And nobody else is schooling them. Nobody else is helping them from a leadership perspective, put the framing around what they can and can't do, the goals, like Brian said. What do you think?
No, I 100% agree. In fact, as Brian was speaking, I was thinking of what is good autonomy, right? Like if we wanted to define what is good autonomy, one would be making sure that you have clarity on outcomes at the very top, right? So you know what you are delivering for the organization and for the company as a whole, right? How you get there is definitely something that you can do. But the second is the education, right? You have education of or access to, like Brian used to run this thing. It was a community effort that used to be run across a bunch of different organizations. It would talk about CD and challenges with DevOps and stuff like that. Something like that. It needs to exist to help teams know what is available within the company, even before you go outside, right? And then the third one is there has to be a accountability on autonomy, which means if you violate that blast radius, there has to be some discussion. There has to be something. It can't be without impact, essentially.
Consequences.
Some consequences, yes.
So leadership, community, and consequences. Ooh, that sounds like a book. No, but I'm serious.
Yeah.
It starts with leadership, enabling then the community to happen, right? The sharing that has to go on, but then understand the consequence, right? You run that little stop sign down at the end of the road, know that the local town cop, Officer Hockenberry, honest to goodness, know that you're likely to get a $15 roll through ticket for that. And you have that accountability.
So I think that's the thing, right? I feel, so if I put myself in a shoe of a person who's working as an individual contributor, contributing towards a goal, and if I asked for autonomy, what I'm really looking for is I need to get to that station, and I'm sort of building a rail line to it. I'll figure out what I want to use. I have all the standards, which is I know it's going to be this sized gauges that I'm going to lay in line, and this and this and that and the other. I know the load bearing strength that needs to be happening on that, and I know the station to go to. How I get there is my problem, but I need all of that other stuff told to me, no matter at what level I am. I mean, frankly, I can argue that even a distinguished engineer level person would not be able to succeed given 100% autonomy on everything without a North Star.
Well, at that point, they're just a crazy professor. They are just experimental in nature, right? Okay, we're going to put you over there because you have star power. Well, we'll do this with Brian.
Cannons.
Yeah,
cannons is what they are.
I think every organization has somebody who is, spends their late nights doing these kinds of things off hours, right? And then they come back in, there's this cool thing I want to try. It's interesting to want to balance that, because I do want everybody to come in and feel energized by solving the business problem. We always say we're solving problems with code. Sometimes the attraction is not solving the problem for whatever reason. Sometimes the attraction is learning a new toy, experimenting with something new.
And that's
all there is. In fact, I mean, when me and Brian, we have done that. Like, in fact, I would say that some of the discussions we used to have, like early last year in 2020, used to be, okay, we've gotten to this point where the journey has been amazing. We need another journey like this. Like, that's what we were looking for. Right. And part of the reason why both of us started looking elsewhere was because of that journey. Right. So I completely agree with you. Once a cool thing is found, you are now on the lookout for the next journey to next coolness.
Yeah, because that super cool thing's now boring.
Exactly. Yep. No, you're right. 100%.
You know what? Well, then what do we do when we add into the mix? We want to have long-lived teams. So I want a product team that is long-lived.
Oh, yes.
But they've learned that new tech. They've applied it a couple of times. And how do you keep from getting old? Like, what's the date night for the team?
But there's different kinds of people, right?
Yes.
I mean, I have been mostly on long-lived teams.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a series of novel problems.
It's evolution. It's evolution, right? Like, so here is what I always tell whatever team I'm a part of is, if we solve this, what's next is a bigger, more meatier thing to actually take on and do, right? And that's the journey we were on. Like, we were able to get Brian out of his long-running job into something that's more startup-y within the company, and sort of drive that, because it was really interesting, but we were still evolving. I think it's at point when evolution stopped or stagnated, that's when you're out. If you're evolving, if you have newer and better challenges to meet, I think product teams are happy and challenged. Like, they want to feel that I'm making a difference today, I'm making a difference tomorrow.
Well, it isn't as though we're going to say that the entire product team is suddenly so bored that they're all just gonna walk out the door. It's not the entire product team.
Sure,
but
agreed.
Somebody joined the team a little bit earlier. Somebody joined you're gonna have different personalities. So part of this, right, this comes back to leadership, eye roll.
Yeah.
Some of it comes back to knowing the product team and saying, you know what, Brian has a tendency to need to have new experiences. So maybe he's on a long-term team. Maybe he's shorter lived, or maybe he's the guy that
but here's the thing,
give him some other opportunities.
Here's the thing about long-lived product teams, right? It's not that everybody on that team stays for a long period of time.
Bingo.
There's a long continuity. There's tribal knowledge within the team. There's a core of consistency that you can trace through.
I'm going to use something that I think I may have read or heard somewhere else, but there's 3 kinds of people in a product team, right? There is the pioneers. They are the ones who found the thing, who invented fire, whatever else, right? Like that. Those are the pioneers.
Okay.
They got the cool stuff done, the real cool kids, right? Then there is the settlers, right? So they basically say, okay, you know what? Everything is fine, but we need roofs over our head. We need a path to the city hall. We need a city hall, whatever, all of that stuff.
Right.
And then there are the town builders, right? So the pioneers are the ones who jump very quickly, like one to another, right? The settlers tend to stay long. And then the town builders are the ones who are going to govern it. They're going to grow it. Like, they're going to have like all of the other stuff that happens after that. So
the
that's
key to that team is having a mix. And I guess that's where I was going with it, is that when we think about long-lived teams, I think there are many people who think about, especially when we're talking the government space where we're acquiring, it's a real term, that we get a team. And we think we're getting that team. And then when the contract is done, and it's normally for a period, right? It isn't for always for a product. It might be for a time period. I think, what we're talking about here is making sure that you have, it's normal succession. It's normal succession planning, but a long-lived team is not made of all pioneers. It's not made of all settlers. It's not made of all town builders. And if you have a team that's heavy in one of those, you better be thinking about how you're going to equalize that.
I was just going to say that there has to be a certain mix, and not just that, your level of autonomy changes with that composition, right? With pioneers, they typically tend to have a lot of autonomy coming in, right? And then as the town gets to a point, there is no way you can destroy and build the town again and again, right? Like you have to have it there and settled. So I think that changes. So the mix is important. I think this is something I realized very honestly, full disclosure, from my past lives, where I was focused sometimes on hiring a lot of pioneers into the team, right? And pioneers can get bored very easily, right? And I saw that challenge over time. It took me about a year or so to learn that. And then sort of course correction happened a little bit after that, right? But that essentially is something that I've carried forward after that into my new roles. I've realized like that's not going to work out.
It's funny. My very first manager, my very first programming job, when I changed managers, the advice that she gave him was, don't let Brian get bored.
It's still true to this day.
My productivity just flows right into the toilet if I'm bored.
Yep.
So we've been talking about leadership and community. We talked about consequences. We've talked about the different types of personalities that need to make up a team. And obviously the settlers and the pioneers and the town builders, that's within a team, but you would also see that scattered throughout the entire organization. We talked about single-throated choke. Need to find a better term for that. I'm not going to say enterprise architect because that gives me flashbacks to like TOGAF and DODAF and all of those other frameworks.
Should I be very happy that I don't know what those mean?
Yes, you should.
Okay.
You should feel good about those. You should feel good about those. So, something that Brian and I had chatted about a couple of days ago, and I'll bring it up here, is that experiments are experiments. Now, hear me out. There are times where you apply the word experiment to the product as it's going through, and you are conducting an experiment on how you can improve. Maybe it's a metric, right? So you need to improve something. So you have a hypothesis and an experiment against that. Not talking about those types of experiments. Those experiments are appropriate when we talk about the product team. But the other experiments that we have people doing, the true pioneering experiments outside the buoys, there oftentimes is no thought about how they would ever operationalize what that thing is. They come up with something really cool, and then they're like, wow, this is great. Let's take this to production. Like, whoa back. Do we even have any kind of minimum standards for how this was knitted together? Do we understand the security posture against this? Anything?
There's some things we can tie together here, though. And it all comes down to why CD is how everybody should be operating at all times.
Oh, you opportunist.
Absolutely.
And yes.
All right. Is that number one, a lot of people build things that are cool and never think about operations. Right? They say, we're going to build this and then we're going to put it out there. And then of course the people are really excited about it. They're pioneers, so they get bored and they leave when it's 80% done. And then we're going to deploy it. And I have a friend of mine right now who has this problem where somebody built something that was a passion project that didn't need to be built, but he convinced his management was the right thing to do. It's architecturally a nightmare. Literally far more expensive to run on hardware than the old solution.
Wow.
It's was written really poorly in silos with just terribly constructed, and he left before it went to production.
Oh, beautiful.
right? But here's
Check in,
the
Is
thing.
wasn't that
check in.
shouldn't that have been a telltale sign? I'm
Wait,
just
no,
putting it out there.
no. Hang on. Let me tie it together. All right. So that's one case. The other case is we're gonna, you know what? We wanna learn Qlang. So we're gonna build this mission critical thing in Qlang, right? Qlang is just whatever new thing, right? We're gonna build this mission critical thing in Qlang because we want to learn it, and then we're gonna throw it in production, all right? Both of those things would have been mitigated if they'd been operating using continuous delivery. Because if you're operating using continuous delivery, operations is feature 0. We have something running in production to verify we can get to production before we do anything else. And if we can't get to production, we don't do anything because it's just wasted work, right? And if we're really doing continuous delivery correctly, that mitigates our experiments because first we have to validate the experiment will actually run in our environment before we can go forward. And that helps limit the blast radius. You also don't get these passion projects that just are a complete trash that you only find out at the end because it's got to operate in production. If you always prioritize operations over development, you're going to be better off.
I think, Brian, one thing I'd call out here is CD is too too advanced a tool to catch this. This should be just basic, like it should be a review, like as easy as a design review or something like that should catch it. Like even before you enter this entire process, like CD will hit them hard back at their, like it'll slap them in their face.
Yeah, but
It's a perfect safety net. Hold on, guys. It's a good safety net.
No, I need to respond.
Oh,
no, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I disagree, and here's why. Because what you're saying is that we're going to use like a review process to mitigate it. But what I'm saying is that we have a principle. It's not a review process. It's a principle that the very first thing we deliver every time is the ability to deliver, right? That this is our standard operating model is we always deliver. And our standard operating model should not be we're going to go to committee and discuss, right?
Yes, no, agreed. I'm just saying, yes, so I'm considering design as a part of a design review or something like that as part of code review for the very first thing that you would deliver on this.
Design, or even couch it even more simply than that. Teams meet together and they should be having the design discussion up front, right? Before they're starting down a pathway. In general, they'll have not every aspect, not every feature, not every function, but in general, they'll have that conversation. I think where we're getting wrapped around this is that we're talking about it a little bit in extremes. There's going to be some experimentation that is mad scientist over in the corner, but he's disconnected and he isn't going to be taking it forward into production. We should, because he's truly experimenting, right? He's, we've said, you go over there. We've got a nice cement wall right here. We're all protected from you.
I have zero problem with that because it's not going to impact the business.
But I would hope that in his mind, if we're doing well as leaders, building community, giving them some consequences and helping them to think, while they're busy pioneering over there, they should be thinking about, if I were to operationalize this, what are the trades? And so when I've got teams that are truly prototyping, they're just throwing stuff together, I will ask them, if you ever had to take this forward, what would you have to change? What would you have to think about? What would you have to do? And they don't have to build it in, they don't have to make that change. And it doesn't have to be CI/CD ready. It doesn't have to be ready to go into a pipeline. They're literally, it's not coming off their machine.
I see.
Sorry, go ahead. The inverse of this, right? Is a tip that I heard a long time ago that I fell in love with, right? If we're truly doing a proof of concept on something, we want to use a technology that can't go to the production, that can't be operationalized, because we've built something that was experimentally coded, which means it was built the wrong way with terrible architecture while we're trying to learn something. And we don't want to be forced to put it in production and eat all the tech debt.
Yeah, I agree with that conceptually. And I don't know how many times somebody has done an experiment and then there is a discussion. Let's show the experiment. They understand that it's not written for this. And then all of a sudden it's, we got to have it. We got to have it right away. Oh, right. And then there is all of this pressure.
We'll rewrite it. We'll rewrite it with all the learnings to make sure it's written correctly.
Exactly.
And operationalized.
So, All right, gang. Well, we are getting to the bewitching hour.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that like CD, like Brian defines it. So here's the thing, right? I used to believe I was very strong in terms of the proponent of CD.
Mm-hmm.
And then Brian actually taught me what CD was for sure, because it is a test that you
Mm-hmm.
have to pass
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that you really are building something that's going to last, that's going to be
Exactly.
able to share with others can collaborate on all of that. Like everything else essentially ties into that. So that's one thing that I learned coming from over at Netflix to Walmart. The one thing that I did learn as one of the first things I ever did with Brian was to understand the extent to which CD can actually fix stuff
Mm-hmm.
and fail fast, like before you even tried your like a hand at something, right? Like literally the ability to deliver. So there is one way to test the limits of that autonomy, right? You're saying, oh, yes, you can remain autonomous as long as you deliver within this. And so there you have your nice sort of benchmark to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of saves you all of the other trouble of adding additional guardrails, which I think still need to happen in some meaningful way, but that is going to be the main thing, right?
So experiment, but generally experiments are outside the buoys. They are done in such a way that there is not a path to production, intentionally not a path to production with pure experimentation. Experimenting, minimum viable experimenting can happen within a product team, but it has to be done with CD. You have to have minimum CD applied to it. So those two differentiators.
In the end, Tracy, it's all about like these are all companies that have to deliver value to whoever their backers are, their investors are, their stakeholders are, right? So in the end, it's all about that. So even an experiment that's happening, there has to be value, like you said, the minimum. That's why it's like a minimum viable product. Like the viability is defined by that value, and so So I think for me, it that essentially creates that consequences as well as the viability factor. Like, okay, you can't do this. That's it. It's a done deal, right? Or if you're doing further, or if you're walking past the buoy, there are consequences, right? Those consequences could come back to, basically hit you in the face.
Oh, you guys have exhausted me, but in a good way, in a very good way. So, Vilas, are you going to need to actually go get a drink? Was it that bad?
No, it wasn't that bad, but I think I'm still going to get a drink.
Oh, well, yeah. Hello. And since Brian he did a, what do you call that? A bait and switch?
I had 1 ounce of Angel's.
It doesn't matter. I'm drinking bougie water in a wine glass to pretend, to give myself that feeling, that faux-ness. Yeah. So at any rate, guys, I super appreciate every time we get together. Vila, I hope to have you back again. Maybe we'll bring you on and spar with you about immersion architecture. Brian, you're not swaying me on that one. I'm never gonna agree.
That's because you all you have to do is see the example, and then you will agree.
Well, perhaps, but I'll have to see it to believe it.
I'm a pragmatist, not an idealist.
This was fun, and here is the thing, right? Me and Brian have a lot of these discussions. We often talk about, should we just record our sessions when we talk? Because there is so much stuff that we do back and forth. So this was actually fantastic, Tracy. I think I really appreciate you having this forum to be able to contribute and actually talk about it freely.
Well, we're gonna keep doing this, and so for everybody who does listen to this and has fun with this, please subscribe. We're trying to grow this, but we really want to know honestly what you think. So this is on YouTube. It's also on the road to DevHops. We've got an email address that neither of us can ever remember anytime that we're here. So when we post this,
in the linky thing.
Yeah, we'll do. Hey, it's down there in the linky thing, or we could do the up there in the link thing. But I haven't figured out how to do that up there in the link.
And I'd love to see what questions or topics people are really interested in, right? Because usually this is just you and me coming up with something that annoyed us.
That's where it starts. Every week starts with a rant. Actually,
but I will join a rant session.
Well, here we are.
Always welcome, Villas.
Every time. It's always about a rant. So please send us your rants. Please send us your positivities. And it doesn't have to be through any special mailbox. Ping us on LinkedIn. If you have our emails, contact us, hit us up on text, as long as it's not at weird hours. So, and with that, Hey, thanks for joining On the Road to DevHops.